Welcome to Product by Design with Kyle and Eva,
a podcast about product management and product design,
where we'll talk about subjects from product strategy to inclusive design.
Every episode, we just have a good conversation about all the things that you may already know or not know, and occasionally we'll have a guest from maybe engineering or other product managers and designers to talk about all these topics.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Product by Design with Kyle and Eva.
Good day. Hello.
How's it going?
Nobody can see it over the audio, but I had my surgery on Monday. And so today I can hear that I sound a little different. I don't know if you can hear. Do I sound different to you at all?
You do sound a little bit different, but we were having some mic issues. So
actually, yes, that is a bigger problem than my voice. Just want to say out loud here. Yes, my husband broke my microphone, so here we are. I mean, yeah, that's what it is. But I did have a surgery on my throat, so I mean, not on my throat. Yeah, but I sound a little different in my ear. Yeah, and then I'm like, can I record? I mean, it's not like embarrassing or anything, but I sound so different in my head right now. Better than a couple of days ago. A couple of days ago, my husband was like, you sound like a different person. I'm like, yeah, this is fun. And now I'm back to 80% of what I think I sound like. Anyways, but it's really fun to have surgery because after that, you're just super, super sore and tired for days. And here we are. I feel great. Yeah, now I feel great.
That's good. Good. Yeah, it's good to have you back for one. And is that when your husband destroyed the microphone? Was when you sounded different? Is he just like?
But yes, I don't know. I think, yeah, I think he was recording something for his work or something. But yeah, I always told him like, no, it shouldn't, be sitting that way. The microphone needs to be sitting that way. And he was like, no, it's fine. And here we are. I'm sure everyone has that kind of like argument with their, partners and stuff. And it's always like, okay, I don't want to start a fight. And this is such a small deal. It's fine. I will give my input and let it be. But then when you let it be, it comes back that you're right. It always is like, oh, okay. I will never say anything more than like, oh, that sucks. But inside, you're like, see, I was right. Those little moments. But anyways, yeah, just a microphone, whatever. How are things with you?
Things are good. Yeah, everything's going well. I'm going to put a little plug in here right at the beginning for my product newsletter. I would normally probably wait until the very end, but I've been putting together various different newsletters for quite some time now, and over the past month or so have consolidated and restructured those. And so you can find it at productthinking.substack.com. And
can you repeat the URL?
Yeah, productthinking.substack.com. So if you go to Substack, which is a great place to find various different newsletters and things like that, it's Product Thinking. So go check it out.
Okay.
We will, the topic that we'll be covering in just a little bit on today's podcast, we'll also be doing a newsletter about. So if you're interested in this and want more straight to your inbox, you're going to want to go subscribe for free or not for free, your choice. But yeah, go just check it out for free and let me know what you think. So anyway, just want to throw that plug in there early. I know everybody listens to the end because it's, we have so much great content here, but in case, for whatever reason, you just didn't make it to the end because you had something come up, just wanted to get that in there.
Oh, I like this. So guess who is subscribing right now? I just have become a subscriber as of 2 seconds ago. And what I like about this is that you can get a little taste and then decide to make contribution, monetary contribution or not.
Yeah.
get a little taste of that.
Exactly. It's
Awesome.
totally your choice. So there's like varying levels of it. So if you want it less frequently, it's free. Or if you want the very frequent one, you can choose to upgrade at some point. So
I just discovered that there is not discovered. That sounds really big, but I just see that you have a meme in your first the featured article. That is, yep, that's where you want to be.
Yep.
I love this. Yeah. This is actually great. Yeah. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but it's great. It looks like my cat. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go.
I want some, like, what are those called? Sound bites of people clapping. So anytime we announce anything, we just like have that sound bite. We'll get there. I mean, I'm not making a demand of like, let's add this now, but we need to add some sound bites. Whenever we're making an announcement, we just clap like crazy. But you guys get on there and subscribe.
There we go.
This is very exciting.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to segue into a different thing.
The hurricane that came through?
Yeah. Everyone, we're in Utah. We're not in, what are those called? Tornado Alley? That's what it's called, right? The other part of the country. But yeah, the windstorm, or as you called it, the hurricane.
Yeah.
And I was not super affected. Very scared, but that was it. And Kyle, I want to hear what happened in your corner of Utah.
Yeah, so it's interesting for if anybody doesn't live in a very narrow area within Utah, we get crazy hurricane-like weather. It feels like about once a decade. So it just comes through and just it's kind of a dry hurricane. So we don't get like the rain that is usually associated with hurricanes, but we get the wind, and it's just it's devastating and it's crazy. And we had one of those massive hurricane-like windstorms blow through. What has it been, like a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that?
Man, week and a half-ish? Yeah. No, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
Something like that,
right after our last time, yeah.
Yeah, a little while ago. And it's just absolutely insane. So it's been about 10 years since the last one blew through. So it was in 2011 that the last one blew through. And didn't do quite as much damage last time. This one, I think, blew down thousands of trees across Salt Lake.
Uprooted.
Yeah, literally uprooted, where it pulled up the grass in some places, like the sidewalk and things like that. So you can see literally like the roots, like the entire root system of the tree just has come up. Last time it was mostly just like pine trees and things like that. This time it was everything. Massive trees just entirely uprooted, which is crazy. Trampolines, things like that, just hanging from like power lines and wrapped around power poles and things like that. At our house, we had a good portion of our fence blown out. I think that's pretty consistent across anybody who has a fence, really. A lot of roofs that were blown significantly off. We had a few houses in our area where it not only stripped off like the shingles, but it stripped off like down to the wood and even took some of the wood off of like the side of the house or the roofs of the house. So opened up the house, blew out windows, things like that. It was just crazy amount of wind. So that was what we were dealing with. Knocked out power for some people for like a week or two, which is just what you'd expect in like a hurricane down in the southern part of the United States or in some places. But, we're nowhere near anywhere that you would expect something like that.
Yeah. So I just sent Kyle a link in the chat. I just want you to see. That's like the worst that we saw. Like someone's house just basically get crushed by a tree.
Yep.
It's awful. And then I didn't know that where you are was even worse because I don't know how it happened, but we live in the blessed square of downtown that had power, had internet, had everything, but it was just so scary. And what we experienced was definitely not nothing compared to everyone else. And we just heard a bunch of like wind blowing, and for some reason it was coming through an angle that it sounded like what are those called? The lighthouse horn sound, foghorn?
Yeah,
I think that's what it's called. Very, very like grumbly, like, but then very alarming. but it was coming through inside your apartment. Like that, imagine that. That was like terrifying to hear. My cats were all freaking out. Well, except for one of them. One of them literally was just like hanging, on the cat tree right by the window, where the other two cats plus, me and my husband were just like, we're going to die. And that one cat was just like strolling and no big deal. No big deal at all. But yeah, I just feel really bad for people that, lost their homes and had, significant damage, and you guys had your fence, just various degree of damage. I just think it was crazy that like nobody really knew how to like, you know what I'm saying? Like when there's a flash flood or something, you kind of, I can reinforce my window. I can reinforce this part. But this round, I don't feel like a lot of people had any, what are those called? Precautionary measures. It just came.
Yeah, it definitely came. And I feel like we weren't. We saw some of the weather advisory stuff like the night before. So where we live, we tend to get winds coming just around periodically. So whenever we see something like that, we'll go outside and just kind of prepare our yard for that sort of thing, like clean up anything that might get blown around and just kind of do that sort of stuff, just so we don't end up with like lawn furniture in our neighbor's yard and things like that. But I don't think anybody realized it was going to be one of these like once in a decade type storms. And then as it was going on through the night, that's when I think we started to realize like this is going to be another one like 2011 was. Yeah. And so
I didn't know there was another one.
Yeah. I've got pictures. I'll have to send some pictures over from that. Maybe so I posted a video on Twitter of just the morning during the storm. So you can see some of that. Maybe I'll post some more pictures of like 2011. And then we drove around and took pictures as well of just a whole bunch of the uprooted trees and things like that. So maybe I'll post some of those as well. But, and from 2011, so you can see just like some of the comparisons, but crazy. And that's when we realized like, oh no, this is getting really bad. And we hadn't taken down our trampoline, which was it was foolish. So I was out in the middle of the night throwing sandbags on it because I was like, all right, we got to get this thing secured. Otherwise it's going to blow away.
Did it blow?
No. So thankfully, yeah. So I had a bunch of sandbags on it, but then it just kept getting worse and worse into the morning. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really, really bad. I don't think the sandbags are going to hold it. And so this is probably stupid, and I wouldn't advise it for anybody. So don't do what I did. But I was out there. Yeah. So I was out like in the storm, taking apart our trampoline. So that it wouldn't
blown away with it. Like you would have been the additional portion that fly away with the trampoline.
Anyway, yeah. So that, given the amount of like debris and stuff flying around, it's probably not wise to be out in that kind of a storm. But again, it's one of those things that like, do we want it like flying into our house or into our neighbor's house or something? And that was where it's like, nope.
If you take down a power line, your whole neighborhood is going to be like, whose house is that? That's Kyle's trampoline.
Whose trampoline is in that power line? And like, I don't know. That trampoline blew right by our house, and I don't know.
It's like, no, that's not my last name etched on the pole of the trampoline. What are you talking about?
Didn't you guys used to have a trampoline? No, I don't know what you're talking about.
I sold it on eBay. Yeah. But thanks for listening to the weather channel. This is a special report from Salt Lake City, our Salt Lake team. But really though, I just hope that this is listened by some local residents of Salt Lake City, so that they're like, this is very important to talk about. We are literally, in the middle of the 2020 apocalypse.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
What a year so far.
Yeah.
I do want to say that next time, I mean, like you said, once a decade, right? So next time when we have the next, 10 years later windstorm, I hope that we still have this podcast and we talk about this. Like 10 years ago, remember that.
Yeah. And we'll compare it. Yeah. So keep your pictures, and then we'll post like the 2020 storm versus the 2030 or 2029, whenever it hits.
I'm going to put $1 down and say that 10 years later, they'll have robots podcasting. They don't need humans doing podcasts anymore. So there's that.
Oh, all right.
You just heard it here.
Okay. Yeah, heard it here first. Nice.
And how do we move into the future is, I'm trying to segue into our topic today. When we talk about future, when we talk about technology, when we talk about moving forward as a society, how do we get there? It is through prioritization.
That's right.
That was a very sharp light.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So how do we get there into the future of robot podcasters? And it's through strategic prioritization, which is one of my favorite things to kind of think about and talk about, because I think it's such an important thing, but it's also one of the most difficult things. When I think about some of the most difficult things as like a product, not just as a product manager or product team or product organization, but as a company in general, or as people in general, like how do we prioritize, what to do, and more importantly, what not to do? Like these are some of the most difficult decisions that we make, because I think ultimately, we want to be doing the right things, and often we want to be doing as many things as possible, but that's always a recipe for not being able to do the right things, or, kind of focusing, dividing our focus too much. So that is kind of the question is, how do we go about thinking about priorities and prioritization, and how do we, what are some ways to do it? And at, a product level, at a feature level, at a bigger initiative level, those are some of the questions that I think often come up when we talk about prioritization.
Yes. And I almost feel like this is something that, I mean, it's not a surprise for people who are already in product, but I do think that for people who are going into product, this is probably going to be one of the best skill that you can learn going into, because it is a daily conversation. And I think last episode, we actually talked a lot about like, at this point, you're going to have to reprioritize. And then when, the roadmap changes, how do you reorganize your entire, day, week, month? And so this is also a continuous thing that you have to keep doing. And man, maybe we can talk about prioritization for literally like 4 or 5 episodes. But I definitely see this as a skill that not just the product manager would need to possess, but also really everybody on the product team first understanding why prioritization needs to happen and what is the direction. Like, what is your team trying to accomplish when you talk about prioritizing?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the kind of when we get into what I think of as like the key steps to prioritization, I think that's one of the very first ones. So is, understanding some of the why behind it across everybody. But before we jump into that, maybe we should talk a little bit about like just generally the importance of prioritization. And we touched a lot on it last time, but it's probably important to kind of reiterate a little bit here, just in talking about prioritization, because when we were talking about roadmaps, it's about, understanding, what we're doing, where we're going. When we're talking about prioritization, I think it's a very similar idea of what are we going to be focused on? And then importantly, kind of like I mentioned, what are we not going to be focused on? Like, what are some of the things that we are going to be putting either into, a little bit further into the future, or what are things that we're just going to say no to at this point in order to focus our attention? And so I think that's at whether we're talking about at a company level, a product level, like a feature level, or even at a backlog level, like any of those different levels, we have to have an idea of what we're going to be saying yes to and what are the things that we're going to be saying no to in order to just appropriately focus our attention. So I guess that's kind of like one of the main principles for me when it comes to prioritization.
Yep.
And that's not just when it comes to products and initiatives. I think that's like life in general. You know, you have to be like when we're talking about what you're doing personally or meetings or how you're spending your time, like you have to be able to understand where the real value is and what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. Otherwise, you get into this huge loop of, you know, too many things and then not being able to handle all of the things, which, you know, it's an easy thing to see in your life. You know, if there's only so many things you can say yes to, and then at some point you're maxed out. You know, it's the very same principle in, I think it's harder to see something like that, like in a company or a product. There's only so many things you can say yes to before your team or your product is at its max, and you can't do all of the things well. So being able to really focus in and prioritize the right things.
Yeah, I think within that too, when we talk about prioritization as if like, oh, this is the only one thing that can be done at one, you know, given time. But I think that's a misconception a little bit too. That's kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you just like put all your eggs in one basket and say, this is going to be the first thing. So therefore, this is the first and only thing we'll ship. I think if you really chop it down to a very granular level, there are multiple pieces to what you need to get done. And within prioritizing one big task, if you are able to chop it down to, let's say, A, B, C different parts, prioritize, you know, those different parts according to their urgency, because oftentimes we have to wait for other teams or, you know, there are data that we're still waiting on in order to make decision for a particular part. You can still prioritize the other, you know, remaining parts that are able to put down into the conveyor belt and have those be in progress while we wait for, you know, the last part to be done. But then at the same time, you can utilize that time to get started on your second overall task and what, you know, however you chop that. I just feel like when we talk about prioritization, it's not just prioritizing one overall thing, but within the, you know, big goal, there are multiple portions of that goal that you can also examine and prioritize that accordingly. To me, it really is like a conveyor belt. I think sometimes it sounds like a bad thing when we talk about, you know, it is a factory line of conveyor belt, because we do work that is not just like putting parts together without, you know, using your brain. It is a lot of creative work within that. But I think seeing it as a conveyor belt also makes sense. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, depending on how you're kind of going about it. So there's multiple different levels of where you're prioritizing. What you certainly wouldn't want to do is get into any sort of like just building for the sake of like building and getting like features out the door. Like you're kind of a factory of just creating things. But I think that to your point, I think there are multiple levels of prioritization. And I think that's a great point, like where you have, you know, kind of like your strategic level of prioritization, where at a company level, you know, we're saying here is, you know, the strategic things that we're focused on. And then, you know, if you break that into a product team level, you know, as a product team, we say here are the key, you know, one or two things that as a product team we're focused on right now doing or solving for. And then breaking that down even further into, you know, here is, you know, what we're working on in order to solve for those, you know, product level things. And so within this sprint, you know, here's the things that we're working on right now. And so you have kind of like the strategic company level initiatives that you're working on, and then you have kind of the product level, and then you have, you know, at a very execution type level. And within each of those, you know, there's prioritization that needs to happen. And so it's not necessarily that you're prioritizing one thing and it's, you know, that kind of flows all the way down. You know, there's different levels of prioritization that you are having to do within all of that, so that you're, you know, making sure that you're solving the right problems kind of all along the way, you know, where, and I don't think that that's kind of going along that same point. I don't think that you'd want that necessarily dictated from, you know, at the strategic level. You have your leaders of the company or organization kind of deciding here are, you know, some of the strategic things that we're focused on. we wouldn't want them deciding, within a backlog or within a sprint, like what is being worked on. Like that's a total mismatch of like prioritization. We need our leaders to be prioritizing strategically what are the main initiatives that we're focused on. And then within our product teams, figuring out, now that we have our strategic direction, how are we going to do that within our product, and prioritizing the problems that we're solving and how to go about that. And then, within that subset, what are the things that we're going to prioritize solving? Like, what are the biggest risks? What are the biggest things that we need to solve for? And then how can we go about doing that? And there's, some different schools of thought on how, how much you want to work on, how much work in progress you want to have going on at any given time, but, and how big teams should be and that sort of thing. But fundamentally, finding the right amount for your team and your organization so that you're solving the right problems, you're delivering value for your users, and executing well as a team, I think is the fundamental principle for me. And so if that's, focused on one thing at a time, great. If that's, you're able to do a couple things at a time and deliver value as a team for your users, perfect. Then, let's do those things and deliver that value and prioritize the right things at the right levels. So I think that those are some of my thoughts on kind of the points that you brought up, where I think it has multiple different levels that we need to be focused on, and finding the right the right people who are helping prioritize at each of those levels, and then making sure that we're delivering the value at each of those different places.
Yeah, I really like how you summarize the thought of like, okay, we have different level of prioritization, and then you brought up like the highest most level is the strategic level. How do you prioritize, that tier? And then you kind of zoom down. And I definitely earlier jumped the gun a little bit to talk about, the ground. I think the funny thing is like that's usually where I am, talking about the smaller steps, and then you're way, higher when it comes to where we start. So I like how you summarize that. It is definitely not just one prioritization meeting and then you get it all done, right? It's multiple layers of it. And then it kind of drove down to, okay, then what does that mean on the ground level this week? And I like that you pointed it out clearly, like the stakeholders, should they be involved in, what's happening this week? Let me get in and tell you what I need, right? And that's solely just, I dare say, like within the team and, owned by the product manager to decide, to make sure that everything is on track. But yeah, would you say that's correct?
Yeah. So I think that that's definitely along the right lines. And that's kind of jumping into, so I think that there's, in figuring out how to do prioritization. So there's a lot of articles and discussion around like how do we go about prioritizing both strategically and our backlogs and features and things like that. And I think that for me, a lot of the discussion almost starts in the middle, and of, how do we go about doing it? And I think that it needs to almost take a step back and kind of to your point of, where does some of this fall as far as the prioritization goes? And for me, I think that there's 6 steps in prioritizing, whether it's strategically prioritizing or, prioritizing within our products or prioritizing our backlog. I think the same principles apply, but I think that first we have to have, I'll just kind of lay them out and then we can kind of discuss them. But I think that first we have to have the vision and strategy. Second, we have to understand the context. Third, we have to gather the inputs. Fourth, we have to use a framework to visualize. Fifth, we make the decision. And then sixth, we align and realign. So that's kind of the general framework that I think we need to use in order to appropriately prioritize anything that we're doing as far as our strategy or product. So first, I think that if you don't have a good vision and strategy, like any talk of prioritization is just, it's going to be fruitless, because what exactly are you trying to prioritize to? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, I mean, you can still you can still prioritize, but it's going to continually change based on the whims of basically whoever is deciding at that moment, like what you're going to be working on. So if that's like executives or leaders, if there's not like a clear vision and strategy for the business or for the product, then it's going to be, whoever is the highest paid person in the room, or whoever has the most sway at a given time, or whatever the most appealing opportunity is at the moment. Like, you're just going to just be moving back and forth constantly if you don't have a clear vision and strategy for what you want to do as a company or as a product or anything. So that's where I've seen one of the most important starting points is, have a very clear vision and strategy of what you want to accomplish. Otherwise, your prioritization is just going to be changing constantly.
I really like what you said there, and especially when you talked about like the multiple factors that affect the outcome, which is how, the priorities look.
So as far as some different methods go, so actually taking one step back real quick, getting into some of the frameworks is important. And I think that in order to do that, you need to understand a lot of the context. And this kind of almost goes back to some of the like discovery that we've talked about before as well. So how do we do the discovery and some of the design thinking as far as, what is the context that we're operating in? What are users doing? How do we just add to our understanding of what not only users are doing, but stakeholders are doing, and have a really deep understanding of that, and then gather all of the different inputs, so qualitative, quantitative inputs, and that helps us really start to quantify a lot of the data behind how we're going to prioritize, and then qualify a lot of it as well. So what are the stories behind what people are doing? How can we start to not only have that understanding, but have real data points that maybe aren't necessarily quantitative, but are useful in expressing different ways that people are using the product, or potentially will be using, or the way that there are market problems for some of these. And then I think that brings us ultimately to some of these frameworks.
In my career, I feel like I've done, been in teams that do different methods to try to, in a way, quantify or measure which one, should be more important. This one is more important. And there are two different methods that I really like, I guess, for the teams, from my own experience, that have worked really well. And it's very easy to immediately put down some sort of starting point, at least in terms of prioritizing what should be done first. And I want to hear what you think about those two methods. And they might be something that everyone's already familiar with. They're fairly common. The first one is, I think it's called a Moscow method. And I think the official one is like, is this a must have? Is it a should have? Is it a nice to have? Is it a could have? I think the nice to have might be a variant that comes from this method. But and then the last one is won't have, which is no, this is not important. But this one is pretty straightforward. Just basically like, how bad do we need this? I think that's a very, it is basically the core of prioritization. Like, how bad do you need this, right? And I think if you're looking at like 30 features on the board, having this as a starting point, I feel like in my own experience, like the engineers might have a different opinion, but then at least you can say, okay, we have 3 people on the team that think this is a must have, or some features that you think is very important, but then the other 4 people for different reasons think that it's not as important. I think this at least get some sort of like a standards maybe on paper, and say, okay, we have 5 must-haves, voted for this one feature. I think at least that gives you a way to prioritize. If you feel like this is too overwhelming to start, don't know how to approach this, that's one way that I feel like it's, a way to do it quick. And then the second method that I also really like, this one, it's more of a formula. It's kind of putting the impact, the reach. I don't know. Yeah, if this is a term that everyone uses. Basically, just it's how many people it affect or revenue. I think it depends on the feature or scenario. You can switch that out to other factors that affect you more, and confidence level to your estimation, and then divide all that by effort. Basically, the lift of how much time, how much work this takes. So then this formula basically gives you the value of how your work will impact your product or your customers. This one, I think, is called a RISE scoring. So those two methods, I feel like I've encountered different variations of those, but they usually, after the beginning of the meeting, everyone's like, I think this is a must have. I think this one takes a lot more lift than this other person thinks. But then if you hunker down and want to get it all done for all your features on the board, I think at the end of the meeting, I 99% of the time see a much better plan than going into it. So I'm curious what you think about those two methods, or if you have other ones that you like.
You mentioned two of them. So RICE, or the simpler version of that being ICE, which takes out like the reach, and Moscow, which are two of them. So I've broken down, in my mind, there are three broad categorizations of different prioritization frameworks. And for me, these two kind of fall into like a ranking type framework where we can go through and we can find a way to rank different either initiatives or features or items within the backlog. And you mentioned Moscow first. So being able to say like, this is a must have, this is a should have, a could have, or a won't do. And so being able to just give everything basically like a 1 to 4 ranking, and then be able to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. That's, there's other versions of that, where we could just give a 1 to 4 ranking and say, okay, here's our 1s are all yes, our 2s are next in line, 3s are maybe, and 4s are we're just going to drop. And then the same with RICE is it's kind of doing a similar thing where we give the reach and the impact and the confidence. We give and then divide it by the effort. We give everything kind of a numerical value, and then that gives us a score for each of these things, and then we can rank in that way. And then another common one is the weighted shortest job first, which is one, if anybody's familiar with SAFe, is a common one used in the scaled agile framework, which is kind of using the idea of the cost of delay. So what would this cost us if we didn't go and do it now, which is a good idea or good measure of potential lost business value. Yeah. So if we don't do this thing, it has the potential to lose us $80,000 a month in revenue versus this other one, which has the potential to lose us, $30,000 or gain us $500,000, that sort of thing. So kind of gives a similar weighting, and then you're able to rank all of these things. So those are what I consider kind of like ranking ones, where we're able to just get some sort of like numerical value and then rank things and say, okay, here are our initiatives, or here's our products or features or backlog items, and give them a ranking and say, okay, this is how things kind of shake out.
Yeah, that one's interesting because it's literally calculating what's, I believe it's called like opportunity cost, right? In the business world, that's what they call it. And maybe I just have been protected from that method because the second you talk about, 30,000 lost, per month, like that, I'm already sweaty thinking about that. But I mean, is it effective? Probably. Measuring literally like how does it help a business, right? Like how does it help the team? But yeah, I am curious too. Like, do you have a personal favorite or one that you're like, oh, start with this one, then go, this direction? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've used some other ones as well, and I think it kind of depends on the context that you're working in. So there's some other ones that I kind of think of as like matrix style ones that are also really good. There's like value to effort or value to risk, where you kind of take the value of something and you can kind of assign it. Here's the value of something, and that could be like the strategic value, the customer value, the financial value, and then you can plot that out, and then you can take the effort, or you can take that against the risk and plot that out as well, and then kind of create yourself a matrix where everything is given a plot, and then things on like the upper right are these are the things that we're going to do, and then the things in another part of the matrix are these are maybe we're going to do, because they're either high value but also high effort or high risk, that type of thing. And so it gives you kind of a visual way of saying, like, these are in the example of like effort to value, like our high value, low effort ones, like those are relatively easy ones to say, like, okay, yeah. Or high value, low risk ones, like those are easier to say like yes to. Whereas like high value, high risk, we need to think about that. Or high value, high effort, we need to think about that. And there's also the Kano model, which is where you kind of plot out what you think of as far as like the items within either your product or your features that you have to have, which if you don't, you'd have very dissatisfied customers. What are kind of like your performant ones, like table stakes almost, and then what are your very satisfied? So what are like the delight types of features? So those are kind of like the things that I think of as like matrix, almost like matrix style frameworks. And then there's another category which I loosely kind of think of as like functional prioritization. And this is where, again, it's kind of a visual collaborative style framework where you're really putting together what are the things that we really need in order to do something. One that comes to mind that I'm a big fan of in this is user story mapping. So laying out, what is it that we need to include in our product in order to make it functional, for one. So if you're building something from scratch, like here's all of the things that we need, and you can imagine like a storyboard in order to do everything we want, and then start to kind of like draw a line and say, okay, we, in order to get the bare functionality, like we need these two things, and then we need this thing, and we need this thing, and that could get us, the right amount for a certain user group in order to go to market, or in order to make it good for a certain subset of users. And then we need to add this next set. So user story mapping is, I think, a really good one for kind of a functional launch. And then there's also one like buy a feature. A lot of people have probably heard that, where you kind of get together and collaborate on the idea of, everybody has a certain amount of either dollars or votes or points or whatever, and you get to spend that on either features or something else within a product. And this isn't necessarily like a final prioritization, but it's a really good exercise in figuring out like, where do people find the most value in something. Feature buckets is another popular one, where you kind of bucket different things into different areas. Like, what are your metric movers? What are your customer requests? What are your delighters? And what are your strategic features? So making sure that you're kind of always pulling some within each of those buckets. And then I've used the lean canvas before as well, which is, I think, great for like newer product initiatives. So if you're looking to start something new, putting together kind of a lean canvas, so you're understanding, who the customers are, what are the problems, how can you potentially solve it? Or not just a new product, but a new larger feature set or something like that. So I think those are some good ones within the functional area. I've used a number of these across a bunch of different products. And I think that they are all in their own ways add value in some way. I know you kind of cringed at the weighted shortage job first. And I have some of my own qualms with the scaled agile framework for its own reasons and that sort of thing. And I haven't, there's one or two of these I haven't used extensively. But I think that they all kind of add their own different flavors, and it kind of depends on your team and your organization and the users you're working with and the customers you're working with, where they can all add like different value and kind of the stage of the product that you're at. So I think that they all have good things to bring. I guess the one thing I would say is that, I used to work with somebody who kind of had the notion of, if we could just quantify everything, then the data could make a decision for us. And I always took
that sounds familiar.
yeah, I always took issue with that because I don't think that the data can ever make a decision for us. And even if it could only do that with us on the back end making a lot of the decisions prior, and then kind of finagling the data in a way that it kind of output whatever the decision was going to be anyway. So I think that the frameworks are a way for us to visualize the priorities. I don't think they're a way for us to kind of wash our hands of making a decision. And that's kind of why I said that the fifth step for me is making the decision, because I don't think that the data can make a decision. I don't think the framework can make a decision for you. I think it can.
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it can help you visualize. I think, if you plot out in a matrix, I think it's a great way to look and see, like, here is where everything falls. And I don't think that necessarily like only deciding on high value, low risk items is the right decision. I think that there can be some high value, high risk things that you should probably prioritize. And the same with, that you might go through the exercise and find that, just force ranking things based on like the RICE framework. You might find things that fall a little bit lower in the prioritization, that as you do kind of a gut check on it, which I think is important. Like if you were to just rank them yourself, is that where things should fall? And if there's something that kind of falls out of whack and you're like, it's not right, figure out why that's not right. And then, ultimately you need to be responsible for making the decision and making the prioritization. You need to be able to justify it too, why you're making those decisions. And that's why I think using a framework is a helpful input, along with, understanding all of the other inputs, the qualitative and quantitative inputs, understanding the context, all the things, the strategy and the vision and everything that you're doing. All of those things are necessary. And that's why I think the discussion just of frameworks in prioritization is it's a little bit too narrow just in talking about prioritization, because I think all of it is part of the broader context of here's the decisions that we have to make and here's why we're making them. We need all of those inputs in order to make good decisions. So that's kind of my framework for prioritization, and why I think it's a little bit broader discussion than just here's some good frameworks to use. I think that we need to be a little bit more holistic in thinking about how do we prioritize all of these things. And then once you've done that, you have to kind of, like we were talking about, make sure that the team is aligned, the business is aligned, that everybody's kind of aligned. And then you're constantly going back and realigning and updating that, because the priorities are going to shift and things are going to change. And so, you're going to have to adjust your framework or adjust some of your inputs and make changes as you go. So don't expect that your priorities are going to stay the same constantly. They shouldn't be changing on you constantly either. So like if you're swinging wildly from priority to priority, then again, that's a sign of some sort of dysfunction. But if you're staying on the same priority Like if you prioritize your list at the beginning of the year and it stays the same for the entire year, that's probably also a sign of dysfunction. So you should probably be somewhere in the middle where you're not swinging wildly, but you're not staying stagnant for a long period of time either.
I think you just talked about like really not just about prioritization, but like the core of product management. And I guess just being even a functional working person too, especially when you talk about like, yes, we can take framework, we can take data into, the conversation and decide, oh, that's where we stop, right? Because yeah, you can take data and let data take control of your decision making, but is that really a healthy way to do it? And I think you gave a very clear answer of like, no, you don't want to be data driven. You can be data informed, and you still, because I do think that, yeah, data tells you what it is now, but you as a human being knows other elements that cannot be quantified. And sometimes the way we quantify things are not going to be 100% truth to what it is, because we're eventually limited by the data, and how we gather that data, right? And there's so much in between that is not going to be a one-to-one translation. I think keeping that, like your intuition as a product manager, trusting that is also just as important as having that data in front of you and let that take reign of your entire sprint. I think that was very, very, I don't know, just gold nugget right there. And yeah, I also really love that you said we should never just stop at the framework, and you can take that framework, use that, get to where you think, okay, that's a solid point. And do you, as a product manager, just decide to stop there and trust 100% on the framework? Or do you say, okay, this is good, but there's more. We need to, refine this more because of whatever reason, depending on the business, right? And I think that's where a strong product manager can say, okay, I don't think this is, 100% enough. And you keep going and you use that framework to get to where you need to be, but you continue to push for what you believe is important. I feel like this feels very motivational, but I do think that this is where a strong product manager can come in and determine if the framework is enough or not, and that process is finished or not. And having that intuition to gauge that, I've seen it happen, and I think it's almost magical to someone like me who I understand it just by osmosis. But I think once you do it right, the whole team, I think you would never have to convince anybody why you make those decisions, because you have the process down, and it is your process, not so much just, oh, we're doing the Moscow and we stop there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with any of the different frameworks. I think that they all add value in a variety of different ways. But again, I think that if you're stopping with those or relying solely on them, then you're missing part of the picture as far as making the ultimate decision, as far as what you should be prioritizing. And then, I mean, ultimately, like again, it comes down to it's your throat to choke, and so like don't be afraid to make the decision, and make it based on not just the the frameworks that you're using, but also all of the other inputs and data that you're gathering, and the intuition that you have, and the different parts that go into really understanding users and understanding context and all of those different things. Because I mean, ultimately, that's what makes a really good product manager and product team, is really understanding the problems and how to solve them. And these are just tools in the toolkit. There, obviously it's important. Like we have to make prioritization decisions, but we should be again making those decisions and not kind of outsourcing them in some way that whether it's to to a machine or to an algorithm or something like that, because that's just not a good way to get the right decisions made.
Yes, I think I like that every time at the end of the episode, we always go back to like communication, and now we have a second, I guess, written in gold script on the what is that thing? I keep blanking on this thing. Anyways, the commandments, the product commandments. we should start curating like a list of items. Like first, it's like communication. Second one, we have talked about like I don't know how to summarize this, but we just talked about let the data or framework take you where you need to be, and you decide where to go after. Kyle, help me to summarize that.
Oh yeah.
Way to again merge ideas for
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one, but that's a good one. Yeah.
I do think that's very important.
Yep. Yeah, something around like like being data informed, but thoughtfully deciding something. Yeah, we'll have to we'll stew on that one a little bit before we write it in the stone of product commandment. Yeah.
Granite countertop in your kitchen.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally. I think what a conclusion to arrive at. We have another commandment.
There we go.
Sweet.
Cool.
I do want to propose that one of these days we talk about what is a real MVP product, because you sparked something when you mentioned when we're grabbing all these, features to build, we need to include some delightful, elements into that. And I think that would be an interesting episode to talk about when we say MVP, what does that mean? How are we cutting that pyramid of, I'm not going to go into it because I feel like we'll just segue into the second episode right here. But
yeah,
I think that is something, can I call it a misconception? I feel like when I brought up MVP, people were like, oh, that means no delightful. It's all functional, right? And I disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree as well. And you're right. We should not dive into that right now because we'll go off onto an entirely new episode if we start going into the MVP. Okay, we're putting it down on the list. MVP episode coming up in the not too distant future.
Right now. Yeah, what is an MVP product? Anyway, okay, sweet. Added.
Nice.
Sweet. Do you have any product shout outs or any gripes or anything?
All right, shout out and gripe zone. I do have a gripe, so I will. And this,
let's go.
Yeah, this stems from the sound bar on our TV fell, and it pulled out the optical cable that it was connected to. I have this, and so it's just very recently on my mind, but it's a gripe that I have all the time. Flat screen TVs are mounted to the wall. When they're mounted to the wall, there is no way to reach behind them and get at any of the inputs. And it drives me absolutely crazy. And this is the same with it's the same with all of the TVs that we own. I don't know if like brand new ones are better. I doubt that they are, because I feel like I helped my parents recently with theirs, and theirs is relatively new, like a year or two old. But anyway, the design of TVs drives me crazy. Getting the inputs, like the HDMI inputs or the optical cable inputs, they put them at the most inaccessible places behind the TV, and the TV gets mounted to the wall. And once it's mounted to the wall, like you have to smash your face up against the wall just to like see where it is. And that was me. Like I had my face smashed up against the wall with a flashlight, like trying to reach under there to plug it back in. And it just drives me crazy. Like I want to talk to whoever is designing where they put the inputs on these TVs, just to go through like what the thought process is, as far as like once they've mounted it to the wall and they need to put in an HDMI cable to connect it to something, like how do you propose that they do that? And I just want to see it mounted in their like design lab and be like, okay, here's your HDMI cable. It's mounted to the wall. Let's see how you go about doing it. So that is my gripe, just the design of TVs, because I don't know, maybe some people still don't mount them to the wall. I know that we've mounted all of them, and it is so difficult to try and get the input should be either on the bottom or on the side. And some of them are, but some of them aren't. And it just drives me absolutely crazy.
I have a speculation on why they do it. I don't know if it's true or how we can even verify that, but tweet at us if you work for TV designing industry. But my speculation is it because it's more convenient because they have to keep the TV as flat as possible, because that usually is a selling point? Like making the TV paper thin is the goal that would drive more sales.
Yeah, I suspect it's some sort of trade-off like that, and that like the place where they have like the boards on the inside that connect to the inputs, that's just like the place that they get put. And so it's like somewhat of an afterthought, but it makes it so difficult. I hate it. I will gladly trade less thinness for easier accessibility. And that will be like on the next TVs we buy, it will be something that like we are looking at. Like I will be looking and be like, where are the inputs on this TV? Because I will not be like trying to reach my hand up into the middle of the back of the TV to like plug in an HDMI cable. Like that's just because I mean, those things go bad sometimes too. And like you need to swap it out, or you need a longer one. And like, oh man, heaven help you if you need to put in a longer one or something.
Oh, if you move. Yeah.
Oh man, it's terrible. Terrible stuff.
But it's so funny. I never thought about this. And I guess this is only, now I'm really curious because that is such a problem. I can only imagine. We don't mount our TV, but yeah, we just plug it in and call it a day.
Yeah.
And get like a 30 feet cord. Just, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, when you do end up putting it on the wall, just be prepared for the inevitable challenge. Or if you want to put like a new Fire Stick or new Chromecast or new Apple TV or whatever it is in like an HDMI slot, like good luck. If it's mounted, it's just gonna be a huge pain.
Ooh. I like that. And I also want to bring up that like same problem with what are those called? Extension cord that comes with a whole bunch of plugs. What are those called? Those ones that you can extend, but also gives you 5 more things you can plug in. I'm blanking on that for electricity.
Oh, like an adapter?
Kind of, but it's like an extension cord that comes with like a giant panel that have 5 more sockets that you can plug in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But those ones, same problem. It's like, all electronics have different shape and sizes and direction of how the cord comes out of the plug. And you oftentimes it's like, okay, let's play Tetris. How can we fit my micro charger, which, if you want the shorter cord, you have to have that giant adapter right on that. Oh my goodness, what is that called? Let's just call it extension cord.
Yeah, or a surge protector or whatever you're using. Yeah, you have to You
have to play Tetris and fit it all together nicely so that your MacBook charger, I know you can get the extended part of it so that you save a lot more room, but dude, I don't want to have that 500 feet cord hanging down my desk.
Yep.
That's not what I want to do. Anyways, so you get the problem. Same thing. It's like, how do I do this? How do I get there? I want to plug in my stand-up desk. I want to plug in my desk lamp. I want to plug in my charger, phone charger, and second monitor.
Yep.
We just played that game the other day. It's just like, how do we reorganize all these things? Yeah. And it's impossible.
I have two surge protectors under my desk. That's how I solved that. I have one plugged into each of the sockets, and then they go in different directions so that, because you're right, there's no way to get everything plugged in to one because of all of the different shapes. You only get to use like half of the outlets in one. So
right. And that is just across the board a problem. There's no universal solution for plugs. I mean, Apple has crap load of different cords, and I have an Android phone. Anyway, this is a whole new episode for Grimes, I feel like. But my grabs is going to be super quick because apparently I just have been staring at different video viewing subscription services. I know next time we're going to talk about Hulu and Netflix. I almost want to do an honorable mention in that episode because we've been watching The Boys, which is on Amazon Prime.
Okay, no spoilers, Kay.
It's the best thing ever right now. But
yeah, I'm waiting for them all to come out so I can watch season 2.
Yes. I don't know why I brought up Amazon now because my grab is actually about Hulu again. But anyways, sneak peek. I have so many gripes about Hulu. Hopefully I didn't already bring this up, but every time when you go back to an episode of whatever you're watching on Hulu, so you hit play, right? On Netflix, let's say you hit the title, click on it, it will just play, right? For some reason, Hulu, at least on our TV, you hit play, it doesn't play. It brings you into the title, but it's paused. So you actually have to, get to the title they want to watch and hit it once so that it goes into the episode wherever you left off or a new episode or whatever, but it doesn't automatically play. But I'm like, I'm already in the couch, not on the couch, into the cushion, in the couch. Remote's already tossed off onto the coffee table. And I realized, oh no, it actually is not playing. I have to get up and hit play again. Why do I have to hit it twice? I don't know why. I just made it sound like the biggest problem on this planet right now. It is not, but it is definitely why do you make people hit it twice? So the end, that's my guide. It is very, very annoying.
Okay. All right. More to come on that one soon.
Yeah. Today it's all hate, no love.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Hulu. I still love you, but problem.
All right.
That's it.
That's
another episode of All Hate, No Love Gripe Zone.
Yeah. Cool. I guess we'll see everybody next time then.
Yes. See you all next time. Hopefully we'll have some good, lovely shout out instead.
Yes. We would definitely will next time.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can find out more about us and our podcast on our website at productbydesign.co. You can also follow us on Twitter at prodbydesign. That's at prod_by_design. You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Larry Evans. And you can also find Eva on Twitter at Yan Chow Chow. See you next time.